Hi, my name's Martin, and I want to show you my sketchbook. Last December, I stumbled upon a video by Danny Gregory, who has a channel called Sketchbook School, and he told me, why don't you just start sketching again? And I thought it was a great idea. I was running into the Christmas holidays, and I had nothing else to do. So he said, why don't you just start off by drawing uh, a sketch a day? A 7-day challenge. Now that turned into a bit of a sketching frenzy where I filled 160 pages in a month's time. So I want to show you what happened in that month. Here goes. This is my sketchbook. By the way, I bought it on the 6th of December and I started sketching on the 7th. So this is from 7 to 7 January. And I've been using it so intensely that the spine already came off. So I had to stitch it back together using duct tape. So here goes. On the 7th of December, I went out to visit my friend Richard and his wife Linda, who had just become fresh parents. And, they looked a bit shaken, like they didn't know what was happening. And I drew this from memory. So that's that. And the same night, you see how it kicked off this frenzy. Like I couldn't stop, where I added in pages from a notepad. Here you can see me sketching how I think I look while I'm sketching in bed. And it says here, it's probably one of those phases of me where I intensely work on something and then the next month completely forget about it. That hasn't happened yet because this is January. I'm still in the same frenzy, but it's great and enjoy it while it lasts. So the next day, it's a Monday morning, and I need to go out. Train life is what it says here, and don't forget your card. We need to check in, and we saw that the 7:55 train to N should have been cancelled. So we had to wait for the next train, which leads to you know crammed trains full of people standing up, and this led to a guy fainting on the train, and they carried him out in the platform to catch his breath, and it happened to be right in front of my window seat, so I got a good look at what was happening there. So this is the same day on the train, some girls chatting to each other, doing a bit of a spread. And this is all pretty unique for me, I have to add, because I usually don't think of my drawing skills as deserving of being in a sketchbook. That sounds a bit sad, but I usually don't make too much of a fuss about it. I think I once said, drawing is making ink stains that look good. So later this week, I will be 40. So this is not just a sketchbook, but it's more of a daily diary, a sketch diary, if you will. And I sort of reflect on how being this old makes you do all kinds of boring things like buying a wench for a party. And then put too much effort in, and I reflect on that. Like, this is not what this is about. This is about just sketching what's in front of you, and don't put too much effort in. Just to keep going. What comes will come. So then the next day, I did, or I think that's the same night even. I did a self-portrait from memory, which I'd never done before. So it doesn't really look like me, I can tell you. And I also did this, which is sort of a thing lying next to my bed. I made a nettle yarn patch. I wove it myself. This is like a discovery, a trip of trying to find out how our ancestors lived, which is really nice. I had to get to work. I had to interview someone somewhere else, and he wasn't on time. So I had to wait for him in the car outside of his workshop. And this gave me time to sit down and sketch and write about what happens there. And then when I returned home, I baked an egg. This is also one of those big spreads, which was really daunting to me because I usually work on small strips of paper, which get chucked in the bin later. So was a bit of a challenge for me. And another spread, going out working out, just drawn from memory. Going flicking through, thinking about buying houses because I'm 40 now, and we need to, find a way of working with the housing crisis in the Netherlands where we live. And then a funny story: we're preparing my birthday party, and we bought this Instax photo printer, camera picture photo printer, whatever it's called. Uh, something happened with that, but I then found out that the markers I'd bought bled through the page. But this is a spread of reflecting on um, how much coffee I drink a day, which is quite a lot, and I need to tone it down a bit. So this is Wednesday the 10th. So draw what's in front of you. I drew my weapons of choice, which is these 4 pens, which came in this box, these Micron 10, 05, and 01 sized Micron fine liners, and a brush pen to fill up the shadows and that stuff. And then I received a compliment on a new type of shirt I've been wearing from a complete stranger. And, I was a bit skeptical of wearing this shirt at first. It's always nice to get a compliment, especially from strangers. And, I try to capture the pattern of the shirt in black and white. It's a sort of a tartan feel. And then it's a Wednesday night, so that's music night. I play the drums. I play snare drum in a percussion unit, and I sort of reflect on. I've been playing for 32 years now, with lots of fun. But given the whole changing of society, I'm not sure how long this hobby will remain. There's grandpa sitting talking. That's me. Afterwards, I sit down with a few of my fellow players, and this should show you that this is indeed an envelope. This is how I used to sketch, because there was nothing lying around. I did a live sketch of us sitting at the bar afterwards after the rehearsal. That's what's happening there. And then the big day, I'm turning 40, turning the page and turning 40. Should I say something profound about it? How does it feel being 40? Well, you can only know after you've had the whole year. So I could tell you how it felt being 39, but I need to have the full 40 experience before I can say anything of use about it, right? And then I sort of got out of bed and found that my wife had prepared something for me, a little candle, a bun with eggs, and a silly hat, which I put on my head, and it says, silly egg, me. And then some more, also reflecting on the situation in Sudan, because that was going on at the time. I think it still is, but it doesn't receive as much attention as we deserve. And then it's the night of the party. So I drew the location we had hired, which is a sort of a bar you can rent. And it was a lovely party. And I sort of reflect on how we built everything up and had a coffee. And then the night of the party itself, you can see there's a big party going on. I tried my hand for the first time at using color. And then a friend of ours said, there's this trend saying you need to try and split the G. And she challenged me. And, I managed to split the G perfectly. It was more luck than anything else. And says, something I can do. So there's that. A nice little memory there. Some more reflections, and then you can clearly see I start to foray in using colors here. And, what do you get a guy that turns 40? Of course, everyone gave me cans and tins of beer, and then I looked at, the beautiful designs on the tins, and, you know, and then I had to start drinking them, even when I tried to tone down on my alcohol use. But there's that. I also, my wife prepared a beautiful presentation during my party, and I reflect on that. And she'd be working in secret on that for months in advance, and I didn't have a clue. And then we start off the day by having a lovely cup of coffee, and I decided while I was waiting for it to brew to sketch the percolator itself. All right, and then this thing right here, I love this. This is an idea by Rob Poynton. He's a Brit, and he does these extreme perspectives, exaggerated perspectives of slight hills in his hometown or whatever. And I decided, as you know, the Netherlands is fairly flat. What if I did this in my own hometown? And it's sort of every person from my hometown will recognize the street, but they can immediately see that this is clearly off because, there is a slight hill, a slight incline, if you will, in the road, but nothing as extreme as this. So I sort of thought that was a very clever idea. And then we we watched some Netflix series. Brendan Gleeson, wonderful actor in Mr. Mercedes. I drew a sandwich next morning. And then I reflect on how this, drawing frenzy has really put me off my social media addiction, which is really funny. And then I do run another channel. I'm sort of thinking of how should I go about that channel. And then I love what the map men are doing, how they are presenting, their presenting style, their topics, how they use their extremely dry humor to present something in a very interesting, subtle manner. And, do check them out. They're wonderful. And then some more ideas on how I want to make a new video on the use of bread. In English, the word bread exists, which is a cognate of Dutch brood and German Brot and Norwegian Brød. Then why is it Stute in Low Saxon? You should expect something like Brood as well. Well, you can look it up. And then another cup of coffee. It says lubricant for the consciousness. And then I'm out in the train again, doing sketches on a train of people I see sitting around. And here I reflect on how I bought these nice trainers. And this is our intern. He was with us in the east of the Netherlands. We have a slightly different culture, and he's from the absolute west of the country, so he didn't really understand our subtle clues. I reflect on that. And as it says here, I'm a coffee lad. And I drew a coffee person on a coffee filter, which I stuck in here, which is sort of a bit of an artistic idea I had. Went out for a jeu de boule with my colleagues, and I reflect on how, it's a silly game, but once you get started, it really makes you fanatical. And here's my lovely wife. I was sort of taken by her extreme beauty in the morning, how she could be so lively in the morning, gesturing and chatting and blah, 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 quack, quack, quack. It says, such luck that from all those billions of people, precisely you want to be with me. And a book I was reading, and then carrot cake done in extremely, vibrant, fake orange, because that's what it was. It wasn't really carrot cake. It was just one big lump of sugar, but it was really tasty. The enamel of our teeth. So sweet it was, but oh, so much. so tasty. And then I went out to my father-in-law. We went out to my father-in-law, who prepared a lovely meal. Always too much, but he always goes overboard, which is funny because he used to be a ship cook. And then I sat down to teach someone my language. And then I sat down with Richard Simcott, whom I now consider a dear friend. And we had Irish together. We're learning Irish together. And this is me imagining myself going out to perform a poetry somewhere. And I wrote a poem on how that day had progressed, and how I feel that some people really try their best to be very, spiritual, but at the same time, we were seated as poets. We were seated in the front row on a stage that was a little bit too high for the occasion, and all I could see was this huge man, talking about his inner feelings while his belly peeped out from under his shirt. So that was really a bit of a relativism, if you will. Right. And I tried my hand at modern art because I'm writing about how I wrote a Wikipedia article in Low Saxon on a an artist, Theo Wolverkamp, who was very big on modern art. You need to look him up because it's wonderful what he made. But I thought, if he can do it, I can do it too. And I think it worked out quite well, actually. And then I did a big spread again of a piece that was on our table. We went out to the city of Lingen in Germany to visit a Christmas market, and I used my markers to sort of give a general idea of what it looked like. They have this huge fake Christmas tree, and every day at 5 o'clock in the evening, Father Christmas comes flying in. I finished the day with a beer because I had been driving, so back home I had a beer, and I sort of tried to capture all the different colors that reflect off the glass, and how the color of the beer also reflects in the foot of the glass. So it was really lovely. And then the next morning, my wife had to go to work, and I was all alone. That's what it says here. Really sad, which gave me an opportunity to put up the Christmas tree. And then I bought some Ecoline markers because the other markers, bled through the pages. And I sort of say here, new markers that do not press through, bleed through is what it means. And this thing is a spindle, a self-styled spindle made from an old, pen and a few beer mats that sort of allow me to spin my own nettle yarn. I sort of reflect on the whole process here, a tutorial for making your own nettle yarn. Quite a lot of work. Humbles you to think how our ancestors used to live, how difficult it was. And then the next morning, this was what the breakfast table looked like. And my wife said, this is a complete, utter mess. And I promised her to clean it up afterwards because, I have my phone here, chargers, some breakfast stuff, and my sketching materials. And then I saw online someone making a nature journal, and I'd never heard of that before. So I decided to look outside, and I saw this thistle growing in one of my flower pots. And then I went out to buy some backwash, which is a local treat. And then I used hatching to create an image. I never once made an outline of anything you're seeing here. So this is sort of my arm lying like that. And then I tried out different layers with the Ecoline markers. And it turns out they actually do bleed through. Some colour studies. We went out with friends on Christmas Eve, And then I tried some color theory with my pencils. And it's crazy to think that I only used yellow, red, and blue here to create this full spectrum. And then I had to cut some onions, literally, some shallots. And I think this is the highlight of the sketchbook, because I've spent, I think, about 2 to 3 hours, which is the longest I've ever spent on any drawing, creating this kingfisher, which I've recreated from an image, a reference image that I sort of stumbled upon on Facebook. But I just wanted to try out my newly learned color theory. And it's funny to me that, to make the orange stand out, I used blue. And to make the blue stand out, I used orange. And it took a lot of effort to, find all these different spots in his feathers. And then a memory. And then we went out to the theatre. I drew my headphones using my markers. And it took me only about 5 minutes, I think. So it's pretty amazing what you can do with those. And then I drew from my imagination. So it says somewhere in a corner of my fantasy. And here he is, the man himself, Danny Gregory, who got me into this drawing frenzy. We also went out for dinner in a very fancy restaurant, and I sort of reflect on that. Draw what's in front of you. Well, you are, Danny. I decided to make an outline of the city I live in, and then I got bored with it. So it says it was more work than I thought. So it's my sketchbook. I can do whatever I like. So I decided to leave it at that. And then we watched the series Pluribus, and I decided to try and draw the official poster for it. And here's some more. And here I decided to unregister my company from the Chamber of Commerce. So a lot has happened in a month's time. Here I tried my hands on making these fantasy landscapes. And then some world geopolitics stuff. I am a regular follower of this Ukrainian man who sort of gives us daily updates on the situation in Ukraine. And then Mr. Trump said something about it. And doing the dishes, and I saw some lovely color things going on in the bottle of detergent. And I also saw a lovely pattern in the tea cloth. And then I had some problems with my contact lenses. And I went out to the optician that day to get it fixed. And they shone a bright light into my eye and made me look up and down. And then I saw my own veins, which I'd never seen before. I didn't know I had that many. And this is what I looked like that day, because we went out for the music association. I'm part of, the drumming group. And we baked some dough balls. We deep fried dough balls, which is a Dutch delicacy. And then we went out, my wife and me, for a drive into the countryside. This is what the east of the country looks like in some spots. So there's moors and heather. And I reflect on that. And we bought some new coffee, because we think, the usual coffee we use, it's gotten too expensive. So we tried out a new coffee brand, and we actually quite like this one. And then the next morning, I air fried some German Kaiser buns in here. And while I was waiting for that to finish, I decided to draw my air fryer. And then, it's New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, Old Year's Day is what we call it. I sort of think about what happened when I was a child, how we went out with firecrackers and we created these firecracker cakes, stacking them in a circle with the fuses uh, pointing towards each other, and then putting some gunpowder in there. Like, I know it's not called gunpowder, but you get the idea. There's some powder in there, and then lighting it, and then you get a sort of a machine gun style volley of explosions. It's all very, very innocent. And then we bought a bottle of wine, which we really like, to go with the New Year's Eve dinner. And my wife's preparing here, drying her hair. Then it says farewell in 2026. And I decided to, draw my hands like that. And here I made a picture. I took a picture of the light one morning, a very cold winter morning. I saw this light falling into our living room, and I tried to capture that brightness. So it's not so much about the color, which was a focus as well, but not the main focus. The main focus is here on this, hazy sort of glare. And then the 2nd of January, I went to change the tires, which I had lying in the shed, but they turned out to be the wrong size. So we needed to get new ones. And then I sat and looked out the window, and this is the housing estate. This is what most of the Netherlands looks like. And one of the local churches, because my hometown is known for having many, many churches. And I sort of reflect that this is the Roman Catholic Church, and it was built in 1925 by Pastor Peters. And the street I was born in was also named after him. And that's about the connection I have with Pastor Peters. And then I decided to do some more spreads of streets in my hometown, which you usually don't get portrayed because they're bland and boring. And this is actually the street I drew before, of the with the exaggerated perspective, but this is more what it's like. And I sort of included the side street there as well. Some food. I reflect on going to a publisher, and they want to publish my book, which I've written. And then the snow started to fall. This is what it looked like first. First, it was a bit of a sleet, wet snow, which didn't last. Then a few days later, it did. And that was another Saturday, I think. So I went out for dinner or lunch with my wife. This is actually a nice street in my hometown. One of the nicest streets. And then I decided I'd put too much effort in, which I said before. So I decided to draw a dog from memory, which I haven't tried in like 20 years or something like that. And I drew some more dogs from memory because I sort of reflect on how we're both dog lovers. But since we're both, we work full time, we live in a flat, so getting a dog is not an option. And instead of, spending the night watching Netflix thriller dramas, crime dramas, we decided to solve a crime ourselves, which is a game you can play online. And the next day, my mother-in-law was having a birthday, and this is a mug of soup I made for myself. And I reflect on the design on this mug, because every person of my age in primary school got this mug, and it says 50 years of freedom. And I reflect on how long we will be free still. And in 50 years' time, school children will receive another mug saying 50 years of freedom. And then that's the end of my holidays, which I ended with a cup of Doritos. And you see how quickly it's gone. It used to be full when I started drawing. And then the next morning, it was time to get on the train again. And while everyone was scrolling on their phones, I looked around and I saw this robin who came to greet me on the platform, which is really lovely. And I'm not much of a spiritual person, but I did look up the significance. And it says, Google says the bird means rejuvenation and hope. And then I drew some people on the train. And because of the winter weather, it was very cold, it's snowing, and it's a degree in 4 degrees centigrade, -4. So the whole roster of the Dutch railway system was upside down and people were stranded, including me. And so there's that. There was chaos throughout the Netherlands. And I reflect here on how this small trip that usually takes half an hour took me 2.5 hours that day. So I ended up in bed, sketching some more, waiting for my wife to join me for the night. And says, this is our bedroom. It's not much, but we don't need much. And then the next day, my wife had to go out in the freezing cold, -4, with the car on iced streets. You can see the icicles hanging from the street lantern here. And because the national railway system was still in disarray, I decided to work from home. As you can see here, we're actually at this table right now, so you can get a grasp of what the rest over here looks like. And I saw my shoes and I saw another pair of shoes, and I wanted to do a spread like this to say that I have too many shoes, and I'm a bit ashamed to admit that I don't even wear them all that often. And I decided to draw a cauliflower because that was on the table that day, and use my newly acquired color theory to make it more lively, stick out from the page. And then that's the 7th of January, where I had to get my car and get it outfitted with new all-season tires. So I had to walk home. I sort of saw this overpass. This is a roundabout. That's Dutch engineering for you. Where over here, the train, here goes the train. This is the train station. But this is a roundabout. And underneath the roundabout is a cycle path, and including footpaths. So I sort of loved the use of colours here, where red and yellow and blue were the main colours in that scene. Then I had to pick up the car again later that day because it was still snowy, as you can see. And this is the local pub. And then I reflect on what this, sketching journey has brought me. And I say, farewell. And that's my sketchbook. Thank you very much.